I was once invited to speak at a university, and after my talk, a young student came up to me. She was perhaps 21 or 22 years old, standing at what should be the most exciting phase of life, full of potential and possibility. But as she spoke to me, I could see something deeply troubling in her eyes. She said, "I feel like a failure. My classmate just got an internship at a top company. My neighbor's daughter is studying abroad. My cousin just won an award. Everyone around me is achieving something, and I'm just ordinary. I look at social media, and everyone seems to be living such amazing lives, and here I am, just struggling to get through each day, feeling like I'm not enough, like I'm falling behind, like I'll never measure up." As I listened to her pour out her heart, I felt a deep sadness because I recognized in her words something that has become perhaps the most pervasive source of suffering in our modern world. Not poverty, not illness, not even loneliness, but comparison. This young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, who had her own unique gifts and path, who had so much to offer, was destroying her own joy, her own confidence, her own growth by measuring herself against everyone else. She was living her life looking sideways instead of forward, and in doing so, she was missing her own journey entirely. This conversation has stayed with me because I see this same pattern everywhere I go. In every conversation, in every counseling session, in every interaction, I see people who are torturing themselves through comparison. And I want to talk to you today about this silent killer, this invisible poison that is robbing you of your peace, your joy, your growth, and your potential. Because until you understand what comparison is doing to you and learn to free yourself from it, you will never experience the fullness of what your life could be. Let me start by telling you a story that captures the absurdity of comparison. There was once a fish who lived in a river. One day, the fish saw a bird flying overhead and thought, "Look at how free that bird is, soaring through the sky. I'm stuck here in this water, limited, unable to fly. I'm inferior to that bird. I'm a failure as a creature." The fish became depressed, stopped eating, stopped swimming with joy, consumed by the belief that because it couldn't fly, it was somehow less than. Meanwhile, the bird looked down at the fish swimming gracefully through the water and thought, "Look at how peaceful that fish is, gliding through the depths. I can never do that. I would drown if I tried. I'm limited to the sky, unable to explore the underwater world. I'm inferior to that fish. I'm inadequate." And the bird too became unhappy, consumed by what it lacked, rather than grateful for what it had. Do you see the absurdity? A fish comparing itself to a bird comparing itself to a fish. Each has completely different natures, different habitats, different purposes, different gifts. Comparison between them is meaningless. And yet this is exactly what we do every single day. We compare our journey to someone else's journey, our chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20, our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, our struggles to someone else's successes, our weaknesses to someone else's strengths. And we conclude that we're not enough, that we're falling behind, that we're inferior, that we're failing. But here's the truth that will set you free if you truly understand it. Comparison is not just unhelpful, it's fundamentally flawed. It's based on a false premise. The premise that there is one path, one timeline, one definition of success, one way to live a good life, and whoever is furthest along that path is winning, while everyone else is losing. But this premise is completely wrong. There is no single path. There is no universal timeline. There is no one definition of success or fulfillment. There are billions of unique paths, one for each person, each with their own timeline, their own challenges, their own lessons, their own destinations. You are not in a race with anyone else. You are on your own unique journey. Your only meaningful comparison is with who you were yesterday, not with who someone else is today. Your only relevant question is, am I growing? Am I learning? Am I becoming more of who I'm meant to be? Not am I ahead of or behind this other person. Let me tell you what comparison does to you, why I call it a silent killer of growth. First, comparison paralyzes you. When you're constantly measuring yourself against others and finding yourself lacking, you lose motivation. You think, why bother trying? I'll never be as good as them anyway. Or you become so intimidated by others' achievements that you don't even start your own journey. You see someone who's already successful in an area you're interested in, and instead of being inspired, you're discouraged. They're so far ahead. I cool never reach that level. Why even try? And so you don't. You stay stuck, not because you lack ability, but because comparison has convinced you that you're inadequate before you even begin. I counseled a young man who wanted to start a YouTube channel sharing his thoughts on philosophy and personal development. But every time he thought about it, he would look at established creators in that space, see their millions of subscribers, their polished videos, their confident delivery, and he would think, I could never be like them. My videos would be amateur. No one would watch. I'd be embarrassed. And so for 3 years he did nothing. 3 years of paralysis because he was comparing his hypothetical beginning to someone else's established middle or end. Finally, I asked him, do you think those creators you admire started with millions of subscribers? Do you think their first videos were polished and perfect? He paused. No, I suppose not. Then why are you comparing your beginning to their present? Why are you judging yourself for not being where they are when they've been doing this for years and you haven't even started? That conversation freed him. He started his channel. His first videos were indeed amateur. He had almost no viewers initially. But he kept going, kept improving, kept learning. 2 years later, he has a modest but engaged following. He's grown tremendously in his skills, and most importantly, he's fulfilled because he's expressing himself and contributing value. But he almost never experienced any of that because comparison had paralyzed him. Second, comparison distorts your perception of reality. When you compare yourself to others, you're almost never comparing accurately. You're comparing your internal experience, everything you know about yourself, your struggles, your doubts, your failures, your mess, to someone else's external appearance. The curated version they present to the world, the highlights, the successes, the polished image. This is fundamentally unfair comparison. You see someone's Instagram post of their perfect vacation and compare it to your ordinary life, not realizing that the vacation is 1 week out of 52, that their ordinary life might be just as mundane or even more difficult than yours, that the perfect photo might have required 20 takes and heavy filtering. You see a colleague get promoted and think they have it all together, not knowing about the personal struggles they're facing, the marriage that's falling apart, the health issue they're dealing with, the loneliness they feel. You're comparing your whole messy truth to a tiny, selective slice of someone else's life. And then you feel inadequate based on this completely distorted comparison. It's like comparing an entire movie, including all the boring parts and difficult scenes, to just the exciting 2-minute trailer of another movie, and concluding your movie is terrible. The comparison is meaningless because the data sets are completely different. Third, comparison robs you of gratitude and joy. When you're constantly looking at what others have that you don't, you cannot appreciate what you do have. You might have a stable job, but you're too busy envying someone else's exciting career to feel grateful for your stability. You might have loving relationships, but you're too focused on someone else's seemingly perfect wrong. Hence, to appreciate the genuine love in your life, you might have your health, but you're too busy envying someone else's wealth to recognize that health is the foundation of everything. Comparison creates a mindset of scarcity and lack. You're always focused on the gap, on what you don't have, on where you fall short. And this focus on lack makes you miserable regardless of what you actually have or achieve. Because no matter what you achieve, there will always be someone who has achieved more in some dimension. No matter what you have, there will always be someone who has more of something. If your happiness depends on being better than everyone else, or even being as good as everyone else in every way, you will never be happy. It's an impossible and exhausting standard. Fourth, and perhaps most tragically, comparison prevents you from discovering and developing your own unique gifts. You are born with a unique combination of talents, interests, experiences, and perspectives that no one else has. Your purpose in life is to discover these gifts and develop them, to become the fullest expression of your unique self. to contribute to the world in ways that only you can. But when you're consumed with comparison, when you're trying to be like someone else, when you're measuring yourself against someone else's path, you're not developing your gifts. You're trying to copy someone else's. Let me tell you about a woman I know who spent years trying to build a career in corporate finance because that's what successful people did, or so she thought. She compared herself to colleagues who were thriving in that environment, and she always felt inadequate, like she was struggling while they were soaring. She was miserable, but she kept pushing because she thought success looked like what they had achieved. Finally, after a breakdown, she took time to actually ask herself what she wanted, what her gifts were, what gave her energy rather than drained it. She realized her gift was working with children, that she came alive in educational settings, that her purpose was in teaching and mentoring. She made a radical shift in careers. Her income dropped significantly. By conventional comparison metrics, she fell behind her finance colleagues. But for the first time in her adult life, she felt aligned, fulfilled, purposeful. She stopped comparing herself to people on completely different paths and started walking her own path. And in doing so, she discovered gifts she never knew she had, made impacts she never could have made in finance, and found a joy that no amount of corporate success could have given her. When you compare yourself to others, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking, am I as good as them? When you should be asking, am I becoming more fully myself? You're trying to run someone else's race instead of running your own, and you cannot win a race that's not yours to run. So how do we break free from this comparison trap? How do we stop this silent killer from destroying our growth, our joy, our potential? Let me share with you some practices, some shifts in perspective that can liberate you from the prison of comparison. First, you must consciously and deliberately reduce your exposure to comparison triggers. For most people in modern life, the biggest source of comparison is social media. You scroll through Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you see a constant stream of other people's achievements, vacations, relationships, possessions, experiences. And your brain, which is not evolved to process this much information about this many people's lives, goes into comparison overdrive. You feel inadequate because you're comparing your regular life to hundreds of people's highlight reels. You need to radically reduce or even eliminate social media consumption, especially if you notice it makes you feel worse about yourself. This is not about being uninformed or disconnected. This is about protecting your mental and emotional well-being. Every minute you spend scrolling through other people's curated lives is a minute you're not spending living your own life. Every moment of comparison-induced inadequacy is a moment stolen from your own growth and joy. I'm not saying you must delete all social media forever. I'm saying you need to be honest about its impact on you and set strict boundaries. Maybe you check it once a day for 10 minutes rather than constantly throughout the day. Maybe you unfollow accounts that consistently make you feel inadequate. Maybe you take extended breaks. The specific approach matters less than the recognition that you need to protect yourself from constant comparison triggers. Second, you must practice what I call intentional gratitude. Comparison focuses your attention on lack, on what you don't have. Gratitude focuses your attention on abundance, on what you do have. These are mutually exclusive mindsets. You cannot simultaneously feel grateful for your life and feel inadequate compared to others' lives. So you must deliberately, daily cultivate gratitude. Every evening before you sleep, write down 3 specific things you're grateful for in your life. Not generic things like I'm grateful for my family, but specific moments or aspects. I'm grateful for the conversation I had with my daughter this morning where she shared her dreams with me. I'm grateful that my body is healthy enough to take a walk in the park. I'm grateful for the skills I've developed that allow me to do work I find meaningful. The more specific you are, the more you train your brain to notice what's good in your life rather than what's lacking compared to others. This isn't about denying your challenges or pretending everything is perfect. This is about balancing your perspective, about ensuring that your attention is not exclusively on the gap, but also on the gifts. Because what you focus on expands. If you focus on lack and comparison, you'll see more to feel inadequate about. If you focus on gratitude and abundance, you'll see more to appreciate. Third, you must redefine success on your own terms rather than society's terms. Society has very narrow definitions of success, wealth, status, fame, power, conventional achievement. And when you accept these definitions uncritically, you'll inevitably compare yourself to others on these metrics and often find yourself lacking. But what if these metrics don't actually align with what you truly value? What if your version of a successful life looks completely different from society's version? You need to get clear on what success means to you specifically, not what it means to your parents, your peers, your culture, or social media, but to you. What do you actually value? What brings you fulfillment? What would make you feel at the end of your life that you lived well? For some people, success is deep relationships and being a present parent. For others, it's creating art or solving complex problems. For others, it's serving their community or experiencing diverse cultures. There's no one right answer. But until you define success for yourself, you'll be chasing society's definition and comparing yourself to others on metrics that might not even matter to you. Get clear on your values. Define what a successful life looks like based on those values, and then measure your progress against your own definition rather than someone else's achievements on metrics you don't even care about. Fourth, you must practice celebrating others' successes instead of resenting them. This might seem counterintuitive. How does celebrating others' successes help you stop comparing yourself to them? Here's how. When you train yourself to genuinely celebrate others' wins, you shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Scarcity mindset says, if they succeed, there's less success available for me. Their win is my loss. Abundance mindset says, their success doesn't diminish my opportunities. In fact, their success proves that success is possible. Their win can inspire and teach me. When you can genuinely feel happy for someone else's achievement without it triggering inadequacy in yourself, you've freed yourself from comparison. You recognize that you're not in competition with them, that their path is different from yours, that their success doesn't define your worth. Practice this. When you see someone succeed, notice if your immediate reaction is envy or inadequacy. Then consciously shift it. Good for them, they worked hard for that. Their success doesn't mean anything about my worth or potential. I'm happy for them. This takes practice because we're conditioned toward comparison and envy. But with repetition, you can retrain your response. And as you do, you'll notice something beautiful. You feel lighter, happier, more at peace. Because envy and comparison are heavy burdens. Celebration and genuine happiness for others is liberating. Fifth, you must commit to competing only with yourself. The only comparison that serves your growth is comparing yourself to who you were in the past. Am I more skilled than I was a year ago? Am I kinder, wiser, more patient than I was 6 months ago? Am I taking better care of myself than I was last month? Have I learned from my mistakes and grown? This is productive comparison because you're measuring your progress on your own journey. Every week, reflect on how you've grown. What did you learn this week? What did you do this week that was difficult or outside your comfort zone? Where did you show courage, kindness, or effort? Acknowledge your growth, even small growth. Celebrate your progress, even incremental progress. Because you're not trying to be better than someone else. You're trying to be better than you were. That's the only race that matters. Keep a growth journal. Track your learning, your improvements, your small wins. When you feel inadequate because of comparison to others, read your growth journal. And remember how far you've come on your own path. This anchors you in your own journey rather than getting lost in others' journeys. Sixth and finally, you must cultivate self-compassion. Comparison is often rooted in harsh self-judgment, in a belief that you're not enough as you are, that you need to be more like someone else to be acceptable. This is a form of self-rejection. And the antidote to self-rejection is self-compassion. Self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness you would treat a good friend. When you notice yourself falling into comparison and feeling inadequate, instead of piling on more criticism, I'm such a failure for not being as successful as them, speak to yourself with kindness. I'm doing my best. I'm on my own timeline. My journey is different from theirs, and that's okay. I'm enough as I am, and I'm also growing and learning. This doesn't mean you excuse yourself from growth or effort. This means you don't use comparison as a stick to beat yourself with. You can be committed to growth and improvement while also accepting yourself as you are. In fact, self-acceptance is often what enables growth because you're not paralyzed by shame and inadequacy. Let me close with this. You have one life, one unique, unrepeatable life. You have been given a specific combination of gifts, challenges, experiences, and opportunities that no one else has. Your purpose is not to live someone else's life or to become a copy of someone else. Your purpose is to become the fullest expression of yourself, to walk your path, to contribute your unique gifts, to learn your unique lessons. But you cannot do this while constantly looking sideways at others' paths. You cannot discover who you're meant to be while trying to